Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Orchardcast Headlines, your periodic daily news update. I'm your host, Jeremy Appel. Here are your top news stories of Thursday, August 21st, 2025. Today, we're starting here in Alberta. Globe and Mail reporter Alana Smith got her hands on documents that shed some light on how the province's measles outbreak, which began in March, spiraled out of control. As of Thursday, there have been almost 1,800 measles cases in Alberta, just 5 of which are active. By contrast, there were fewer than 1,400 measles cases across the entire United States in 2025, according to the Center for Disease Control. Internal emails the Globe obtained through a Freedom of Information request show that Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Mark Joffe, and Alberta Health Services, or AHS, officials were in constant contact about how to mitigate the outbreak. Measures discussed included contact tracing, targeted healthcare guidance, and outreach to impacted communities. Dr. Joffe's contract expired in April, leaving Alberta without a chief medical officer of health as measles spread to all areas of the province. The documents show that health officials often had to wait for government approval to proceed, which made it difficult to quickly implement public health measures. A May 13th meeting note states that any presentation AHS officials want to give to a particular audience requires approval from the health minister. There was a particular struggle to get transmission under control in Mennonite communities, the documents show. An early major outbreak was connected to Two Hills Mennonite School in central Alberta, with a 7-year-old riding the bus to and from school while infected. This contributed to more than 170 possible contacts, according to a March 27th email from a regional health officer to Joffe. 2 weeks later, health officials appeared ready to give up on mitigating the spread because parents were refusing to comply with public health measures at a school where less than a quarter of children were vaccinated. In an email written a few days before his contract ended, Joffe acknowledged that enforcement is not a realistic option, but that it was important to have public health measures in place to protect the broader population. Moving along to national news, voting on a new contract for 10,000 Air Canada flight attendants begins next week after a 3-day strike over the weekend. The flight attendants, represented by CUPE, defied back-to-work orders from the federal government and the Canada Industrial Relations Board before reaching a tentative agreement with Air Canada in the wee hours of August 19th. CUPE members will only be voting on the portion of the contract that deals with hourly pay. The 4-year agreement proposes pay increases between 16% and 20%, depending on members' seniority. Under an agreement reached with the mediator, members won't be voting on the rest of the agreement, which appears to be phasing out unpaid groundwork. Cabin crews not being paid for work before the plane takes off and after it lands was a key rallying cry during the strike. The proposed agreement includes 50% of hourly pay for work done up to an hour before takeoff, increasing to 70% by the final year of the contract. Voting on the hourly pay proposal will be held between August 27th and September 6th. Over to the digital realm, an investigation from reporter Rory White at Canada's National Observer, or CNO, found that the far-right news outlet, the Epoch Times, continues to advertise on Facebook and Instagram in Canada despite being banned by Meta. The Epoch Times, a newspaper owned by everyone's favorite Chinese anti-communist cult, the Falun Gong, has spent more than $300,000 on Meta ads over the past year, which have been viewed a total of more than 22 million times. The newspaper has been banned from advertising on Meta platforms since 2019, when it was found to have used false page names to advertise in support of US President Donald Trump and spread conspiracy theories about his political rivals. The ban was renewed last year in the UK because of the Epoch Times tendency to spread climate disinformation. But CNO found that the newspaper continues to use fake pages to promote ads that are presented as research surveys. In order to see the survey results, users are required to provide their emails, which then automatically signs them up for updates from the Epoch Times. Since August 2024, the newspaper has used 3 separate aliases to become one of the top spending Meta advertisers in Canada. The outlet spent more than $40,000 from August to October 2024 to advertise under the name Great Reads, with surveys asking questions like, do you think Canadian immigration levels are too high? When CNO contacted Meta for comment on these ads, it disabled the ads, but didn't respond to any questions. The Epoch Times then spent nearly $140,000 to advertise similar surveys as The Pulse in the lead up to Canada's federal election from January to April 2025, despite not being registered as a third-party advertiser. CNO reached out for comment again. This time, Meta said it disabled the ads for violating its policies and will forbid the advertiser from advertising again. But then, Meta accepted almost $120,000 in additional ad revenue from the Epoch Times to run the same ads as before, this time under a new name, Opinion Lab. Robert Neubauer, an expert in digital influence operations at the University of Winnipeg, told CNO that Meta's unwillingness to enforce its own policies is likely because it doesn't want to kill its golden goose of advertising. He also pointed out that there's a recent shift away from content moderation across big tech. At the beginning of the year, Meta ended its independent fact-checking program in the US. The company continues to ban most Canadian news from its platforms, but not, I'll note, The Orchard. Over to international news, figures from a classified Israeli military database reveal that more than 80% of the people Israeli forces have killed in Gaza since October 2023 are civilians. That's according to a joint investigation by British newspaper The Guardian and independent Israeli-Palestinian publication 972. In May, the database listed almost 9,000 Palestinian fighters as dead or probably dead. By that time, 53,000 Palestinians had been killed in Gaza, according to local health officials, who don't distinguish between civilians and combatants. The figures in the classified Israeli database suggest that 5 out of every 6 people killed in Gaza have been non-combatants. This contrasts sharply with official Israeli claims that its forces have killed 20,000 militants with a 1-to-1 civilian to combatant ratio. The only conflicts that have had a higher civilian death ratio since 1989 are the Rwanda genocide, the Srebrenica massacre, and Russia's siege of Mariupol in eastern Ukraine, according to figures from the Uppsala Conflict Data Program. But while Srebrenica and Mariupol had higher civilian death rates than Gaza, the larger wars they were a part of, Bosnia and Ukraine, respectively, had far lower civilian death rates than Gaza. Israeli officials routinely dismiss the overall Gaza death toll as fraudulent, but the Israeli military relies on its figures. The former head of Israeli intelligence recently cited these figures publicly as an accomplishment. The Palestinian figures, however, are widely believed to be an undercount because they only include bodies that have been recovered. This excludes thousands who are believed to be buried under rubble, as well as those who have died of disease, starvation, and other preventable illnesses resulting from the Israeli siege. The internal Israeli figures, which in May listed almost 50,000 suspected Hamas and Islamic Jihad militants in Gaza, are also likely conservative because they don't account for new recruits. Finally, moving over to Europe, German prosecutors have announced the arrest of a Ukrainian vacationing in Italy on suspicion of blowing up the undersea Nord Stream gas pipelines in 2022. The 49-year-old man, referred to by German officials as Serhi K, is suspected of being part of a group of people who sailed in a yacht from a German port on the Baltic Sea and planting explosives to damage the pipelines, which ship Russian gas to Germany. Immediately after the act of sabotage, Swedish and Danish investigators attempted to pin the attack on Russia, but abandoned their investigation due to insufficient evidence. Meanwhile, German officials became increasingly convinced it was done by Ukrainians. In 2022, the CIA urged the Ukrainian government not to sabotage pipelines after receiving a tip from its Dutch counterpart that that's what they were planning on doing. Last year, German police issued an arrest warrant for a Ukrainian diving instructor living in Poland, referred to as Volodymyr Z. But Polish authorities allowed him to escape to Ukraine. That's your daily news update for Thursday, August 21st, 2025. Again, I'm just starting out with this, so I would greatly appreciate your feedback. Till next time.